and
Okay,
pause if you
welcome
want
to the
look
Crow
deep.
Discovery Project. I wanted to get a chemtrail clip out here because I, in an offhand way, mentioned coal dust the other day, and I shouldn't have done that because I hadn't looked into it. As far as I can tell, the whole coal dust thing is unverifiable and probably disinformation. There seems to be no root for how it happened, or where that came from. What I'm going to do here is give just verifiable facts that chemtrailing is going on, and it has been for a long time. And it's in a chronological order, and in the description of this clip I will put a link that has all this in one document. So here we go. First up, here's a U.S. patent, and it covers a method or apparatus for altering a region in the Earth's atmosphere, ionosphere or magnetosphere. Shows how stratospheric and tropospheric aerosols can be manipulated using electromagnetic energy in order to modify the weather. This is done through ground-based antennas like HAARP. They're called ionospheric heaters. And you can look up these things in the articles that I am showing you here. Smoking Gun, the HAARP and chemtrail connection, and Chemtrails Exposed. So what we're going to do here is hit a few of these things. Really, there's no further argument. I can demonstrate all the way up to the modern age that the Air Force is involved in this, among others. Next up, the first federally funded weather modification was in 1891 by George Deerenforth, or whatever that name is. This is a scary guy. You know, he just assaulted the atmosphere with all kinds of bad stuff, and it kind of shows the disregard people have for the quote-unquote science they're doing. And let's move to the next one. Nikola Tesla, you know, you hear so much about this man, but he was basically responsible for this patent number. And here we have the art of transmitting electrical energy through natural mediums, in which Tesla unveils how electromagnetic energy, things like HAARP, can be transmitted and received through the atmosphere. And this is probably a foundational document to the later HAARP and things like that, which is a bit ironic because not too long ago they announced in the media they were closing HAARP. Whether or not that happened, I guarantee you there are still devices like this operating. I opened with a clip in the background that shows frequency patterns in the clouds. Next up, Tesla theorized that the entire Earth might be illuminated by shooting electromagnetic energy. The altitude mentioned is 35,000 feet. This is a critical thing because I have used flight radar for so long and shot so many chem planes. I can tell you the high altitude planes start at about 35,000 feet. Some of them go just over 40. There are occasionally ones that are much higher that are not on flight radar. I have personally witnessed chemtrails endlessly every month being sprayed at this altitude. Next, the scientific era of weather modification began famously in 1946 with a trio of scientists from the General Electric Laboratories. Here's three names. The last one, Bernard Vonnegut, is in fact the brother of novelist Kurt Vonnegut. So what happened here was this trio popularizes the fact that under certain circumstances, dumping substances from an airplane into clouds causes precipitation. I think it's silver iodide, or I forget what the name is. I believe it's silver iodide. This is the old cloud seeding thing, but much came out of this General Electric Lab study. There are patents and other things you can look up. Next up, the earliest recorded instance of electricity being intentionally used to modify particles in the atmosphere can be found in 1884. The experiments of Sir Oliver Lodge made this patent, and that is a long way back. Next up. In 1958, the chief White House advisor on weather modification, Captain Howard T. Orville, said the U.S. Defense Department was studying ways to manipulate the charges of the earth and skies that affect weather by using an electronic beam to ionize or de-ionize the atmosphere in any given area. Now this one is critical. There's the patent number. Again, these are all facts. You can look them up and verify them. What this is basically about is the first mention of aluminum being used in this process. For those who are not fast asleep or refusing to educate themselves, they will understand that aluminum is the #1 chemical ingredient that is common across the lab reports that we have been witness to from those who have been trying to prove chemtrails are real. This also goes on to talk about putting junk straight into, airplanes and jet engines to dump on us. But that's only part of it. This next slide talks about the use of barium, which is the second most common element in chemtrails. And I think the third one, it's strontium or something like that. I think I've got that right. Barium and the strontium can be connected to using holograms in free space. So, I mean, it goes on and on and on. And with all these patents, there is no cogent argument that is going to be able to be levied against this, that this hasn't been done and isn't being done. I mean, these are verifiable facts. To top it off, we have a U.S. military document entitled Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. So, back in 1996, they wrote a document that they were going to get better at this, to the point where in 2025, some years from today, 10 years from today, they will own the weather. So how can anyone make the argument that this is not going on? I mean, this is damning. It talks about aerosols. It talks about electromagnetic energy. So this whole idea of whether chemtrails are real or not is really not an arguable point anymore for anyone who wants to go do the research and understand what has happened in the past that leads to today and what you can verifiably look at over your head in almost every populated city center. There's basically three kinds of people that are in this argument these days. The first are people who are fortunate enough to live in an area where there are no chemtrails. I know for a fact that I have spoke with people near the Himalaya who have never seen a chemtrail. This would be northern India, Tibet. There are a couple other places that I have talked to people that have never seen a chemtrail. Almost every other major city population on this planet, there are people posting online or talking about what they're seeing in the sky. Now, I have lived in a flight path in San Diego for at least 30 years, the last 10 years directly in a flight path. I can say categorically that we have never seen an airliner with passengers on it coming or going from the San Diego International Airport leaving chemtrails or contrails or anything like that. Having said that, these planes all have modern high bypass engines, which are nearly incapable of making what is called a contrail, which is the argument being used against chemtrails. It's a non-starter, and that completely dismisses these objects. And I'm not the only one shooting this stuff. This is a chemtrail. We watched the plane lay it. It lasted for hours, and these little so-called orbs were all over it. And this guy's shooting something, a plasma beam or Lord knows what. I mean, there is something seriously crazy going on here. At the end of the day, anyone who goes and looks at this evidence and then goes to YouTube to see orbs and all these things being shot only when chemtrails are present. Personally, I shoot all the time. I have never shot an orb when chem-planes or chemtrails have not been present. So, just to say it again, the whole coal dust thing doesn't stand up. You can't verify it. It's not real to me until you can verify it. So here's the truth. What we know that we can look up for a fact with past patents, with experiments, with documents that anyone can verify is that chemtrails are nanoparticles that are both magnetically, electromagnetically charged. A lot of this is done at around 35,000 feet, although we know that persistent low-level chemtrails are often mixed with these, and that's generally when you see the sky close in a very short amount of time. So at the end of the day, if you're going to come to the channel and watch this footage, be careful about trying to say that chemtrails don't exist, because to me, it's a bit like saying the sky is not blue. It just simply means you have chosen to hold that position, or you have chosen not to educate yourself, and what I have given you here is a source of endless proofs that this has been going on for decades and that it's going on right now. Anyhow, thank everybody who has come over to the Examiner and subscribed, checking out my last article, which talks exclusively about how our calendar and clocks have been manipulated by ancient Rome and the Vatican. So there it is. Cheers.